Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 169 of Retro Power Uncut, and the first one of 2024, so Happy New Year to everybody. Sorry we didn't catch up with you quite over Christmas. I know Cal left a little message, but we were that inundated with things to do, we struggled a little bit to get that middle of Christmas break episode out, so apologies for that, but we're back with a vengeance. Happy New Year, Merry Christmas to everybody, thanks for all the messages, it's very much appreciated, and we bring more news from the workshop. Nothing too dramatic, but steady progress. Obviously we're a short week this week. We started back on Tuesday, so we're only really a couple of days in, but we're going to start with the Jensen, and a little bit more progress being made on a couple of fronts on that. I think we'd covered the Stu pretty much finishing off the HVAC sort of mounting and its little house that it now lives in. We've covered enough on that. Stu's now moved on to, I'll point at it on the car, this area here where with the new HVAC the fresh air feed for this is not going to be from there. It's actually going to be from the gill vent on this side wing here, which means that this is then spare, and we quite like having a fresh air vent on a car. It's just a nice thing to have in summer, as well as having air conditioning. It's quite nice to just have a general fresh air vent. So we're going to repurpose this air intake as a fresh air vent feed. So to that end, Stu's been working on this aluminium fabrication, which is going to, this tailgate seal, boot seal, will seal up against the underside of the scuttle, so we don't have to actually make any mountings onto that. That'll just butt up against the underside of the scuttle. Fabricated in aluminium, keep the weight down, spot welded aluminium construction, and then this will go, there's a bit of adjustment on the ends here for it to clear a couple of features underneath, and that it needs to clear under the scuttle, hence this sort of shape there. It'll be tidied up a little bit yet, but that's just to clear the underside of there, and then spot welded aluminium construction. That'll bolt onto the bulkhead, and the air will go obviously in there, out there. There's a baffle inside. Basically this section is done such that it's baffled so that any water will definitely drop out prior to the air coming into the car. Obviously water will gather in the bottom of this trough here, and then that'll have two duckbill drains in the bottom of there to let any water out before it can get inside the car. So that's going to be our, and obviously the vents downstream of this will also close off, to shut off that fresh air feed. That's just going to make use of that vent area and give us a nice fresh air feed into the inside of the car. So that's what Stu's working on there. In parallel with that, Tom's working on it. Tom's actually working over there. In fact, he's gone away because his job's currently involving much hammering. But Tom's continuing with the making stuff fit procedure. And we have the new door skins that we mentioned just before Christmas. And in essence, they are too short. Now they're no much more too short than the original doors, and obviously now they're not attached to the door frame. We can do something about that. So he's basically stretching the ends, which is effectively refolding the ends of the door. That's a little bit of a palaver to achieve, because once there's already a sharp crease in the panel, it's quite hard to remove it and redo it. But what essentially that process will involve is putting a radius in just after the existing fold line, and then stretching that radius into the existing return on the door skin, and then recreasing through the centre of that new radius to move the fold line along slightly, if that makes any sense at all. What you can't do is put a new sharp crease in near the old crease. It just won't work. It'll end up going back onto the original crease or making a complete mess of the end of the door. So of the skin. So what we have to do is sort of turn the existing crease into part of a radius and then refold further round that radius. So that's what's about to occur. Both ends, I think we're going to be trying to gain like 1.5 mil, maybe 2 mil on each end of the door. At that, we'll then have a pretty good fit with a little bit of weld deposit down a bit of TIG weld deposit down the back of the wing here, and quite a lot of lead on this point here, because I think it's a pretty standard interceptor thing that there's quite a lot of lead involved here to get the trims to line up with the panel and get the door shut correct. There'll be lead work down here as per the other side, and then stretching the door skin as well. We can get the profile right there, but you may remember from previous week the main reason for changing the door skin was this curvature here was nowhere near right on the door skin. It was far too flat. It's reasonably flat there on the car, but on the front wing, it's much more curved here. And that was just far too flat on the on the original doors. So that's much better on these skins. So anyway, work proceeds apace on making doors that actually fit. Also in the background on this, but not at all photogenic, so there's nothing really for Jamie to film, is I've been doing a bit more work on the rear subframe, trying to make the rear subframe a bit more refined. Again, you may recall, I'll repeat for anybody new coming into the video, this car's been fitted with Heights, American HEIDTS Heights front and rear axle assemblies. The rear is one of their IRS setups, and the front is a Mustang 2 type Heights front end. The Heights rear end is definitely built for the sort of pro touring scene in the USA, and is definitely a bit track focused. Now, I don't really understand the sort of marketing aim there really, because aiming an IRS of that type at a track focus seems a bit strange to me, because the benefits of the IRS are chiefly on the road, not on a track. You could argue it on a track, but realistically a really well located live axle on a nice smooth track is actually pretty good. Where it isn't very good is on a rough road, like most of the roads in the UK. We're dealing with potholes and things, and generally rough and poor condition roads is where the independent rear comes really into its own. I think I've covered this before. I've seen quite a bit of debate in the past about the Mark 1 Escort that we built for Gordon Murray. I've seen a lot of debate on forums backwards and forwards about, oh, well, it won't be any faster around a track. Well, no, it won't be, almost certainly not, probably be slower around a track. But I think Gordon said much the same in his interview with Johnny Smith, that you know, around a track the car would be too soft. That was always the intention. It's a road car. The reason for going with the IRS was because it was a road car. If it had been a track day car, I probably wouldn't have bothered converting it to IRS. All the advantage is to get the compliance and be able to run nice soft spring rates on the road and make the car comfortable to use on the road, and also make the car not lose traction over single wheel bumps. If you drive around the lanes around here, your near side wheels are permanently in single wheel bump going through potholes. The offside wheels are generally on a fairly smooth bit of tarmac. With a live axle, that's a problem. With independent, it's not. So that's the reason for doing that, and that's the reason why this car, the choice was made by the previous guys that worked on this car to convert it to IRS, and I believe that was the correct choice. The type of IRS chosen, whether it was really the right thing to choose for this aim, I can see the benefits of it. Very, very strong differential. There are lots of positives, but the downsides are it was too track focused and consequently not enough compliance, too harsh for a GT type use. So that's what we're doing, is revisiting that rear end. And one of the problems I've had is finding a bushing that would fit in the space available. Long and short now is I tried to revise that to a vertical type bushing. That's not going to work. I'm not convinced by the type of load that's going to be applied to the bush being suitable for the bushings that are available. And so I've gone back to a horizontal bushing, a fore and aft mounted horizontal bushing, like the original Heights setup had. However, I'm going to make it much larger, and in order to do that, I've actually got to cut out a bit more of the body shell. I can't get it into the mounting space that's already available. Fortunately, the chassis blades, anybody familiar with the Jensen construction will know that the rear part of the chassis, there's a tube main backbone chassis, and then there are blades on outriggers at the back that carry the rear suspension area. They originally carried the leaf springs, and they basically mount the rear axle assembly. Well, those have been remade on this car in extremely thick laser cut mild steel, and we can cut that out and modify that very easily, and there's plenty of strength there. Strength is not an issue. Weight maybe, strength definitely not an issue. So I'm going to revise the apertures in the chassis for the IRS mount, so I can get much bigger bushings in. And then we've got to revise the front mountings as well completely. They're just no good at all. So we're going to revise those as well. But anyway, that'll make more sense once it's in front of you and not just in my head. So we'll watch that one develop. We'll walk this way. We'll largely ignore what's behind camera because that's not really very relevant to what's going on here. The doors for the Jensen again, we can see what's going on here. Tom has remade new returns for the ends of the doors, and they eventually will be spot welded to the original door flange. These originally had this shape. They originally had a return on like that. However, the return was obviously damaged in getting the skin off. These were the doors that were on the cars that are being reskinned. The flange was damaged in getting the return off, in getting the skin off, but also we needed to move that lengthways as well and stretch the door frame as well as the skin. So Tom's thoughts were, and I would agree with him, that we've made a new flange and we're going to spot weld the new flange to the door. The offset of the thickness of the material doesn't make any difference to the fit of anything, and it'll have a neat line of sealer put around it, so nobody would ever know that's been done, and it gives the ability to stretch the door to exactly the length we need it to be to fit perfectly in the aperture. So that works really well without us having to lead the aperture miles in and weld the aperture miles in and change things like that. We can just stretch the door frame slightly. Everything's really neat and tidy. Just a good solution to the problem. So yeah, that's again part of what Tom's working on there. We will move on to, I'm just looking around at the various things going on in the paint booth. I'll let Jamie put some bits of footage to go with it. We'll briefly touch on the Redux build that's in progress at the moment. Its trolley is lying here. The second Redux trolley we've got floating around now is lying here. It's a resident in the paint booth at the moment. Following the blast and zinc metal spray that we mentioned end of last year, Gaz has got the sealer work done on that. He's now got the epoxy primer work done on the underside, and he's getting that masked up for the U-Pol Raptor based coating that's going on. So he's getting that all ready because we've got to get all the coatings done in all the areas we can't access once the carbon panels are bonded on. So he's getting all that done, and then the next stage we'll be getting the carbon panels bonded on. So we'll see that in an episode to come. But at the moment we're getting the coatings underway on that, ready for that to take place. We'll briefly mention the Churchill Jaguar. It's kind of continuation of previous. Lots of filler blocking, lots of filler blocking, lots of filler blocking, and more filler blocking, which is continuing pretty well, I believe. I'll let Mark elaborate on that. But I think things are going the right way. We're getting there. It's being the challenge that was mentioned last year, but I think things are progressing and moving forward. A few steps forward, few steps back, as these things tend to be. I imagine the next phase, looking at this door, is going to be another bout of polyester. Yeah, another coat of polyester over the whole lot. Being careful, the next phase there is we've got to polyester it without totally losing the lines that we've got. Yeah, it's a light coat of polyester, probably going a little bit heavier in the areas where we know we need more build, but we have to be quite judicious at this point, not to overbuild everything and lose all the work that's been done so far, but get enough on in areas where we know we need some more build to get the lines right. So it's a juggling act. But it's progressing pretty well. And moving forward, we'll more to see in coming weeks, because sanding kind of looks the same most of the time. Really, there's only so much sanding we can show, really. So yeah, that's what's occurring with Churchill. I noticed Mark's put the door top frames in this morning as well. I think I saw you fetching them this morning. Yesterday. He's getting those in just to check that we've got no horrible surprises there. And so we'll see how that's developing again next week. Moving on from that, Allegros. Bobby's been busy on various areas, so we'll start with the washer tank. And the washer tank mounting. We've got I'm going to put that down there. We have a 3D print of the washer fluid reservoir, as it even says on it, Allegro washer fluid. So we have a 3D print done on our nice new Bamboo Labs Carbon X1 3D printer, we've got that as a mock-up item. And Bobby has been busily building these neat little folded brackets that we've got on both cars now in order to mount this tank in its final spot under here. And then we have the filler neck that will attach to that, which screws down onto the top of there, and then he's made the brackets to hold the actual filler point up here under the bonnet. And so all of that then fits into its final location, thusly behind the outer wing. So that's one area that Bobby's been working on. And did you CNC those brackets? Or are they just handmade? Just handmade, yeah. It's always a juggling act on these things where you've got two of something to do. It's always, is it quicker to draw it on CAD and plasma it and make it, or is it quicker to do it by hand? So he's done these ones by hand. I couldn't tell looking because they're very neatly done. But yeah, he's got those done and put some nice lightning holes and swaged them and generally made them look really smart. So they're in. There's been a little bit of work around looking at the headlamp mountings and front end. Now we're holding fire a little bit on that before taking that too far until we've got the actual carbon fibre outer wings, because there's always going to be a little bit, because as we've mentioned before, the only datums we have are all in CAD for the front wings. So there's always going to be, that's based on scan data and George's drawing, so there's always going to be a little bit of shuffling backwards and forwards. You know, the final the exact tolerances are we're not quite sure of, and we know obviously the wing needs to fit up to the metalwork here, so the exact fit around the headlamp area and then the exact fit for the headlamp surrounds and the grille, we don't want to finalise that until we've got the front wings finalised, just in case. If we make all those parts and then there's a slight adjustment needed because of the wings, we're knackered. So we're going to hold fire doing too much more until we've got those done. What we have got is the Hella lamp units done as a 3D print again, so we're not ruining the actual final lamp units. We've got those now so that we can actually do a mock-up of the front end without risking expensive parts. So that's all ready to go. But as I say, we're going to hold fire on the actual final work around those until we've got the wings done. And I think Cal may elaborate a bit more on that in a little bit. I'm not sure. If not, we'll elaborate next week. But things are happening on that front anyway. And then also, Bobby's been working in the footwell. We have, I don't know if they're fitted or not fitted at the moment. No, they're not fitted at the moment. We have we're using ECU Master PMU16 PDUs, power distribution module, power distribution units in this car. Two of them. They're both sort of run from CAN bus. Both have a big terminal on where the power's fed in and then power's fed out by a multi-way connector that simulates. We've got these 3D printed ones we've done again, so we're not destroying expensive parts in the fabrication workshop, so that we can mount these. These are both being mounted on a folding panel in the passenger footwell. So Bobby's been working on getting the space available for those and working out a mounting method for those so that we've got access and that it's out of the way and things aren't going to get trampled and all the rest of it. So it works afoot on that. He's also mounting, I assume, I've not seen it yet, but I think he's also going to be working on the mounting for the main engine ECU as well. Oh. Aha! Ah, yes, I see. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's the main engine ECU, which is also a ECU Master. I think that's the Black Series ECU. I can't actually remember, but again, a 3D printed one mounted up under the dash, just ahead of the HVAC module, HVAC unit under there, between that and the bulkhead, where we've got room to get the wiring loom in. And in parallel with that, I know Alex is also then working on planning for the wiring loom in this car as well and getting things underway there. I've actually spoken to Reverie today about the airbox for this car, because there were some anomalies on their website with what was and wasn't in stock. So I've spoken to them today. Martin at Reverie has been very, very helpful, sorted that out, and hopefully next week everything was in stock. It was just the way things were being shown basically on the website. But that's hopefully next week we should have, hopefully maybe by the video next week, we'll see, we should have the carbon fibre airbox and backplate and ITG filter combination that's going into this car. There's a 60mm recessed carbon backplate which should clear the fuel rail and give us the right offset of the throttle body into the filter. That'll offset the filter 60mm up, which means then the trumpets, these 90mm trumpets, will sit 30mm into the filter, which is about exactly what we want, and that gives us plenty of room, plenty of airflow space. Then the airbox will sit around that, sit over here, and then the air intake will point away down that away towards the indicator corner of the wing area, and we're going to make probably in carbon, not fully decided yet, but probably a carbon duct that will then mount and feed the air up to that airbox via a sort of small flexible section at the end. So that's all to be done, but we need that airbox in place to enable us to work out the mounting position for, I think I mentioned it before, but for this is obviously an old one, but a mock-up one, but the E-Pass pump we're using electric steering pump because we can't fit the mechanical one in because it goes there and there's just no room for it. So we're going to we need the airbox in place before we can determine the exact positioning and make the brackets for the power steering pump. So that's all happening. Also in the background, Sam's actually working on something else at the moment, but Sam's over there working on an aluminium fabrication for something, I believe. Is that for Camaro? Is that for Camaro? For that? Yeah. Sam's working on something else at the minute, but he's been working on the speaker installation in the doors that we do have. The doors for the other car are over at KS at the moment, although hopefully we'll be getting them back soon. But he's working on got the mountings for the speakers in the doors on this car ready and done. Now we just need the other doors back to be able to continue with those, so that's progressing as well. So yeah, everything's coming together pretty quickly on these. We're getting through the jobs pretty well. It's not going to be very long. I think one of the next phases really will be getting this car onto its rotisserie. We'll get the jig out of the way, get that gone, get this on the rotisserie in this bay. This car can float around wherever. We'll get this on the rotisserie so that we can do the underside finishing on this one, and also get a bit of tooling hopefully made to enable us to make the floor pan repair to that car, because that needs quite a big floor pan repair. That one was a bit of rust it's had a water ingress that's rusted the floor pan out, so we've got one of the last jobs is going to be doing a bit of metal repair on that one. I think that takes us through pretty much everything on these, and at that point I will say bye and hand over to Cal, and we'll see you again in a week's time. Well, anyway, thank you, Nat, and Happy New Year, everyone, which I'm sure he's already said. It's we had a week off, obviously. Those who I did drop a couple of little social media posts warning of that incoming Retro Power Uncutless Sunday. But yes, it's been a nice little break over the Christmas period. The usual story of eating too much, drinking too much, and frankly by the end of the holiday being glad to be back at work. So, what have we been on with? It's actually, because of the fact it's Thursday we normally film these, so it's Thursday today. The last one we filmed was the Thursday before we finished for Christmas. So the Friday was basically just tidying up the workshop and finishing early and going to the pub. And then of course it was a bank holiday Monday. So we've only really had Tuesday, Wednesday. So it's only really 2 days since, 2 days of work since the last video. Nonetheless, quite a lot going on. So let's have a little look around. Escort wise, I think I mentioned, I can't remember if I mentioned or not, that we had the oil leak issue on the diffs. We found that there was a porosity problem with the casings on these, on the differentials we'd used in these. So we pulled both the diffs out to be sent away to have new casings put on. In the meantime, a lot of the focus is interior related. Steve's beavering away upstairs with wiring still, finishing off I think the rear loom for Project Kuma. In the meantime, just out of shot there, Adam's been templating for the carpets. So he's been doing the sound deadening. Obviously you probably have seen quite a while ago we put Dynamat sort of sound deadening on the inside of both the shells. On the kind of main floor pan sections, we then go over the top of that with a 1/2 inch Dyna liner, which is kind of a foamy sound deadening, just gives it some additional heat and sound deadening on the noisiest areas. And then he's just in the process of templating for the carpets. So we're doing like an anthracite square weave or box weave carpet, they call it. Probably most associated with classic Porsches. But I think it's just a nice sort of simple, clean looking appearance that I think will work really well on this car. So Adam's just cutting those sections at the minute. We're going to cut all the sections, and then Dean's got an edge whipping machine, so he'll edge bind all of those sections once we've done them. And speaking of Dean, he's now done the leather work on the last batch of panels we gave him. So they were the kick panels for this car, the rear floor panels, the rear bulkhead panel, the main parcel shelf piece, and the fuel tank sort of cover panel, if you like. They're all looking good. I haven't got them back here yet, but I've seen some pictures he sent me that look great. And then Adam's been working on the second part of the parcel shelf. So the reason we can't just use a normal Escort parcel shelf on these is because the whole rear structure's changed for the fact that we've done the independent rear end in them. So there's struts essentially going up into that parcel shelf area. So it's actually quite a bit deeper forward. And it needs access to the tops of the struts for the damper adjustment. So what we basically do is have one flat panel, which is the one Dean's got at the minute, which has got little machined kind of circular access hatches in it that you can unscrew to get to the damper adjustment. And then the more shapely section at the back of the parcel shelf, which has got a vent in it. So there's vents in the rear scuttle and vents actually in the boot shut sort of aperture. And they're the outgoing cabin air. They kind of keep fresh air circulating through because there's a low pressure area at the back of the car there. You get a low pressure sucking the air out from the car. And the way the air gets from the cabin to that area is through a series of holes in the back of the parcel shelf in the actual structure of the metal. But then consequently the trim panel that goes over there has got a load of slots in it. So because that's quite a shaped area, we're actually using a fiberglass panel that you can buy as a reproduction parcel shelf, but then trimming it down so it doesn't have the front extension. So we then have a separate panel that does the front extension part, and they'll be upholstered individually. And then while we're there, the sort of slot design, we wanted to do something a little bit different there. So we do a metal panel that sits in there. It's going to be a laser cut piece with round holes in it, and it'll have like a sort of a material covering it that can still pass the air through, but means that you can't see the body shell through the holes. And that panel also holds in that rear section of the parcel shelf. So when we did the metalwork on the car, we kind of drew up a CAD outline of that panel with the bolt holes, use that to position the riv nuts on the shell to bolt it to, and then we've kind of reopened that CAD drawing again, drawn in the vent holes into it, cut that panel as a trial on our plasma cutter. We've tested that, that's looking good. So we're going to get those laser cut because it's a final interior part and the edges need to be absolutely perfect because we literally just want to anodise it and put it in the car. Our plasma cutter, although it's extremely good for sort of fabricated parts that we're making elsewhere on the car, the edge finish just isn't quite good enough to literally just leave as a finished edge on a part. So they'll be lasered by a local company. So that's that. Camaro, couple of different things going on with that. Anthony's been on with the battery installation and the battery cable, the main battery cable run through the car. So that's all in now. We've just used a generic fabricated aluminium battery box. Pretty big boot on these, and the space behind the rear seat is quite well out of your eye line when you open the boot, so it doesn't need to be anything particularly fancy. So just a generic aluminium battery holder in there. Run the cable through, so that's all in place. I think at the minute he's working on the handbrake cable arrangement. So I was on one of the orders we placed for Summit Racing ages ago, and I think it was delayed because one of the wing mirrors are on the same order. One of the two mirrors wasn't in stock for ages, but it also had the handbrake cable components on that order, and that came shortly before Christmas. So we're cracking on with that. And then the other area we're tackling is some of the remaining tank fabrication. So for the screen wash, in fact, actually, although Jamie's carefully trying to go up there, I'm going to pull him around this way so we can have a look at the engine bay. So in the engine bay, there's a reservoir that side, which is the brake and clutch fluid reservoir. This side, we're going to machine exactly the same looking reservoir. We're buying a copy of the top part of that tank just from the bare brakes that make that. So we can have an identically matching tank this side, which will be the screen wash fill. And there'll be a spigot in the bottom of that, which then has a hose going to a tank that's mounted under the inner wing. So we can have it looking identical, but actually have a decent sized tank underneath. So Sam's been on with just fabricating up that aluminium tank to go under there. I think he's finished that, it's ready for paint. And then while we're fabricating tanks, we thought we'll tick off the other one that needs doing, which is going to be at the front of this inner wing area under here, which is the coolant expansion overflow tank. So radiator's got a pressure cap that's actually, this is the main fill for the radiator, but it's got a pressure cap hidden underneath with the expansion overflow pipe, which will go to a fabricated tank that we're making under there. So Sam's just doing that at the moment. Once that's done, that can be painted as well. They'll be ready to go on. And I think at that point, actually, that's all plumbing related stuff done. We're getting quite rapidly to the point where it's going to be largely wiring and interior left on this. And I think in fact Dean's actually just started on the seat upholstery. It's going to have a pair of these Recaro LX seats that we're using in quite a lot of things at the minute.
in a sort of dark brown. I think it might be Porsche saddle off the top of my head, leather, so it's like a dark brown leather. So I think that's going to look really nice. So that's that. Eagle-eyed viewers will notice one of my favourite builds of ours is here. This is Kaiser 2. So we did 2 custom-built Mercedes. The first one was a W108 4-door saloon with a Chevy LS3 in it and Jag axles and all manner of custom touches inside and out. This was then the sequel to that car, which is a W111 coupe, which I think is just a gorgeous shaped car, you know, even in totally standard form. And in fact, the exterior of this is more or less standard, apart from the stance being lower than normal because of the air suspension on it and the custom wheels. Externally it is more or less standard. So this is also LS3 powered, running Jag axles, air suspension, quite a lot of custom interior. I think not too long ago we showed a revision being made to the dash, because after the original build we then decided to do a rework of the dash to get a navigation screen in there, which I think has just transformed the interior from being like 90% to being absolutely spot on now. I think it looks awesome. So customer took this car to Windermere, I think it was, in the lakes at some point this year. Noticed on the way back he thought the diff was making a bit of a noise, so just got it back in to investigate what's going on there, give it a general check over as well. So yeah, looking forward to getting this back out there with him for use hopefully in the summer. And then right in front of Jamie here, engine. So Project Churchill, you'll probably have seen that already, the shell in the body shop next door. So because that's at that stage, we're now trying to get all of the ducks in a row, as it were, for the mechanical side of things, so that once the shell's painted, we can get it rolling reasonably briskly, if not straight away. So there's been a couple of prongs of attack. The running gear's all laid out over there. So we've been going through the subframes, stripping the subframes down, basically cataloguing everything there, organise everything into what processes they need refurbishment wise, making sure we've got all the parts either here already, or if we haven't, getting them on order in terms of ball joints, universal joints, checking that all the nuts and bolts are there. Mark had already been through when we stripped it down and organised all the nuts and bolts. They've already been away for zinc nickel plating, but we just wanted to go through and make sure definitely everything was there, and there was a couple of things we'd missed. So now's the time basically to start going through all of that stuff in minute detail and cataloguing it all and planning it all and making sure that we've got everything there. So once all of these things have been away for their relative, that's not the word. Oh, I don't know. Their respective is the word I'm after. Yes, their respective processes. Everything will be there. We can just assemble it all together, get it on the car, and get that shell rolling. And that ties into the engine as well. We want to get the engine build in progress, because realistically, it's going to be easiest to put the engine and transmission in with the front subframe. I don't even know if it'd be possible to put them in afterwards, because every time we've been doing it in dry build, we've dropped the subframe out with the engine on it, or dropped the subframe out, dropped the engine down, and taken it out that way. So we wanted to get the engine build underway. And unlike quite a lot of the other projects we've been doing, where we've just either bought a brand new engine from the manufacturer, or had someone like Sherwood, for instance, on the Escorts build the engine, we're doing this one in-house, like we did with the Toyota engine in the Land Cruiser. So we're at the point of stripping everything down, ordering all the replacement parts we need, and going through refurbishing everything. So the block, I mentioned, I think last episode or the one before, that we were going to bead blast the exterior of the block to try and get a decent level of finish on it, because we'd tried other things like dry ice blasting before and just could never quite get the surface finish we wanted, and we're never that keen on bead blasting something like this because of the worry of getting glass beads stuck down inside oilways. But we were able to extricate all of the gallery plugs, all of the core plugs, so we're happy we'll be able to wash it out. And indeed we then made blanking plates for everything. So the engine was completely sealed anyway, and then what we did was when we had the blast room in use for, I think it was blasting the Redux number 4 body shell just before the Christmas break, we just used that blast room to bead blast this block at the same time, and it's come out really nice. So I think Adam's just in the process of getting all the parts together for this rebuild. The block, now it's cleaned up, will go away, and I think we're just going to have the top face of the head face decked, I don't know whether it's going to be bored or whether we're just going to give it a re-hone on here, because the bores are extremely good. I'll have to confirm that when we actually do it, because I'm not sure. And yeah, we'll get the rebuild of that engine underway. So it'd be nice to start seeing all of the running gear bits of Project Churchill coming together. Upstairs, nearly forgot, in the CAD den, 2 avenues of progress. So George is carrying on with the Quattro project at the minute. We're kind of still at the roughing out phase, where we're just trying to get the shapes and proportions of everything nice. We've been working on the splitter, on the shapes of the arches. He's been working quite a lot on the rear bumper design. We've been thinking about things like which sections of the bumper are going to be bits of bumper and which are going to be bits of quarter panel and that sort of thing. Working out where the individual components start and finish. In fact, a good example is what we were looking at earlier today, is whether the section of quarter panel, the sort of sill that's directly behind the door, is going to be part of the quarter panel with a join line or sort of below the back of the door shut, or whether we'll do a complete sill front to back and the join line will be above that, or whether we have the front part of the air vent intake on the side as part of the sill. So we're juggling things like that at the moment and working out how the components are going to be constructed, roughing out the general shape. And then we started to have discussions about things like the inner arch tubs at the back, where those vents in the quarter panels are how they're going to interact with the arch tub space, where bits are going to be structurally bonded, and that kind of highlighted to us that at some point in the not too distant future, we're going to need to unpick the quarter panels on the shell, do another scan of the sort of underlying structure, so we can start planning the way that the infill structure around the rear arch tubs is going to be constructed, to sort of allow us to start working on the underlying surfaces of the panel. And in fact, speaking of underlying surfaces of panels, for the Escorts, Project 1, Project Kuma, we're doing carbon fibre boot lids and bonnets. And on the bonnets, we CAD designed the B surface, basically the underside skin of the bonnet, to make it a more pleasing design. And it's originally just kind of a cross of bent metal. And KS Composites, George and I went over there yesterday just to have another visual check over the Allegro patterns for the quarter panels and wings, but also they've now machined the tool for the carbon fibre bonnet frame. So we're having a look at that, and yeah, really happy with the way that's looking. And the other thing we were doing while we were there was just going over how the fastenings for the components on that are going to be. So where the hinges attach, where the striker pin attaches, where the safety catch attaches, and where the buffer attaches. We were just going through what fastenings we're going to use before they do the carbon piece. So they'll do hard pads where the buffers are, which are literally drilled and tapped in situ, because the alignment of those isn't that critical, only the in and out, which you can wind with the thread. Whereas the bonnet hinge attachments, we were keen to have a little bit more movement there for alignment purposes. So they're going to do captive floating M8 inserts in those corners where the hinges attach. And then we'll have actual nut plates for the bonnet striker, which gives us quite a lot of adjustment for the bonnet striker position. And those plates will be inserted through some slots that are going to be in the sort of in the part of the front of the frame that's not really visible unless you put your head in the bonnet and look in the engine bay and look back at it from underneath. So that's looking really good. Then Luke has been on with E-Type stuff. So this is the Project Norman E-Type, the Roadster, not the one that's next to me here. Carrying on with the dash design work. And one of the things we've been juggling just before Christmas and now is air vent positioning. So we're really happy with the layout of the console now, the general shape of the dash, the instruments, the way we're doing the screen mechanism with a little covering piece of fascia that motorises up in front of it. But we weren't happy with the air vents, because if you stuck them at the side of the dash, it looked very cramped on the side that's got the instruments. There's not really room in the middle. We could put them each side of the screen, but it kind of broke up that beautiful flowing shape, particularly when you've got the screen cover folded up. So at the minute, we're toying with the idea of having them in some pods on the top of the dash that are kind of half recessed and half up. Now you might naturally think that means you won't be able to angle them down very much, but it's surprising. E-types are incredibly small, and it's surprising how high up you sit. And actually something on the dash top, a vent angled pretty much straight forward, is kind of like shoulder, upper chest area. So I think we'll do a little bit of testing, but I think that's probably the winning idea. And then we're just pushing forward to the point where we can actually create the moulds for those parts. So it's looking likely at the minute we'll do the whole dash fascia and console sort of main structure and fascia as a single composite, either carbon or fiberglass part. So it's going to be a big mould that will be machined to make all of that. And then potentially the dash top as well. I think we might do the vent housings 3D printed as a little separate piece that drops in afterwards and it is upholstered separately. That will just make the upholsterer's life a little bit easier, because that complicated section of upholstery around the vents, if it was done as one piece of leather stitched into the whole dash top, to get the alignment of everything correct, if we have a seam running along the front particularly, it's going to be really hard. So it would be nice, generous to the upholsterer if we make an insert for the vents that's upholstered separately and then drops into a recess in the dash top. So again, we're looking at the design of the dash top, and so we can move forward to making the moulds for that. And I think that pretty much wraps up where we're at this week. So we'll catch you again next week, and hopefully, well, that actually sounded like an enormous amount of progress now I'm thinking about it, given that it was only really 2 days since we last filmed. So with 5 days to go till the next one, hopefully it'll be an exciting move forward next week. And we'll see you then.